Hello everyone and welcome again to my How-To Education channel. As I promised you last week, today we're starting a new topic in economics: Demand, Supply and Market Equilibrium Part 1. After watching this video, don't forget to leave me your feedback. Let's start this lecture with an introduction to the concepts of demand and of quantity demanded. Demand is an economic concept that portrays the consumer's willingness to buy or consume a product or service. Demand is affected by a series of factors that will be discussed later throughout the chapter. Quantity demanded is the number of units of a product or service that people are willing to buy in a given period and at a particular price. Quantity demanded is affected solely by the price of that specific good or service. A demand schedule shows how much of a given product or service people are willing to buy at different prices for a given time period. A demand curve is a graphical representation of the relationship between price and quantity demanded. The following table describes a demand schedule. When the price was $5, the quantity demanded was 10 units. When the price was $4, the quantity demanded was 18 units. When the price was $3, the quantity demanded was 28 units. When the price was $2, the quantity demanded was 40 units. When the price was $1, the quantity demanded was 54 units. The graph aside is the depiction of the demand curve that was drawn based on the demand schedule. We can see that the x-axis portrays the quantity demanded and the y-axis shows the price. Another very important economic concept is the law of demand, which was depicted in the previous graph. It states that as the price of a good or service rises, the quantity demanded by the consumer decreases, and as the price falls, the quantity demanded by the consumer increases. Thus, a negative relationship exists between price and quantity demanded. This explains why the previous graph of the demand curve had a negative slope. The slope of a demand curve will always be negative. It is important to differentiate between the factors affecting demand and the factors affecting quantity demanded. The demand of a good or service is affected, as in increased or decreased, by factors such as the consumer's income, the kind of good, wealth, the prices of other products, consumers' taste and preferences, and expectations about future income, wealth, and prices. The quantity demanded is affected by the price of the product or service itself. That is, an increase in the price of good X will most certainly cause a decrease in the quantity of good X demanded. However, an increase in income, wealth, or price of a substitute is likely to cause an increase in the demand of good X. When the price of a good changes, causing therefore a change in quantity demanded, we say that we have a movement along the demand curve. Let's say, for example, that price changes from $4 to $5. Then, quantity demanded will change from 18 to 10 units. But the 2 points continue to be on the same demand curve. That's why we call it a movement along the demand curve. Sometimes the price of a good stays the same, but other factors cause the demand to change. As for example, a consumer might have a raise in his or her income, or might have inherited a fortune, or might even have been noticed that he or she will receive a higher income or inheritance in the future. Such factors, and all others that cause a change in demand when the price stays the same, will cause a shift in the demand curve. We call it a change in demand. Thus, when the quantity demanded changes without a change in price, We call it a shift in the demand curve or a change in demand. The first graph I cite shows an outward shift from D1 to D2. That means demand increased and demand curve shifted to the right. The second graph shows an inward shift from D1 to D2. That means demand decreased and demand curve shifted to the left. The following demand schedule clearly portrays a change in demand or a shift of the demand curve. We see that we have two columns for quantity demanded and one column for price. So the quantity demanded is changing while the price stays the same. For these cases, we say that we have a change in demand or a shift of the demand curve. Since quantity 2 is always larger than quantity 1, we say that we have an increase in demand or a rightward shift of the demand curve. This is the reference website from which I got the picture I cite to depict the rightward and the leftward shift in the demand curve. Now, let's analyze each factor affecting demand and quantity demanded. Number 1. Price of the good. As the price of a good or service rises, in most cases people tend to buy less of this good or service. Thus, the quantity demanded by consumer decreases. As the price of a good or service falls, in most cases people tend to buy more of this good or service. Thus, the quantity demanded by consumer increases. Both of these situations cause a movement along the demand curve. Two or more goods can be related to each other in two different ways. They can be substitutes, that is, these two or more goods serve the same purpose to the consumer. For example, Coke and Pepsi, coffee and tea, pizza and burger. Let's use the example of pizza and burger. If the price of pizza increases, people will most likely buy less of pizza. Thus, its quantity demanded will decrease, and we're going to have a left movement along the demand curve. With the increase in the price of pizza and the decrease in its quantity demanded, people will tend to shift from pizza to burgers. Thus, the demand of burgers will increase even if its price stays the same. This is depicted by a shift of the demand curve to the right. Or, they can be complementary. That is, these two or more goods are used together, so the demand of one is linked to the demand of the other. For example, laptop and laptop chargers, printer and ink cartridges, movies and popcorn. Let's use the example of laptop and laptop chargers. If the price of laptop increases, people will most likely buy less of laptops. Thus, its quantity demanded will decrease, and we're going to have a left movement along the demand curve. With the increase in the price of laptops and the decrease in its quantity demanded, people will tend to shift away from buying laptop chargers as well, since they won't need them anymore. Thus, the demand of laptop chargers will decrease even if its price stays the same. This is depicted by a shift of the demand curve to the left. Sometimes, the price of a good stays the same, but the consumer gets an income rise or an income drop. Usually, after a rise in income, consumers tend to buy more goods and services. This does not mean that the price of a good changed. It just means that the consumer has more money. Thus, we cannot say that the quantity demanded of this good changed, because this change was not based on the price of the good. We say that the demand for the good increased, which implies a right shift of the demand curve. Wealth is another factor that changes demand and not quantity demanded. That is, the wealthier a person is, the more he or she tends to buy. But since the price of the good is not changing, we say that the demand increased, which implies a right shift of the demand curve. At other times, the consumer might not have had an income gain yet, but already knows of or is expecting an income gain for the future. The consumer might also be expecting a rise in his or her wealth due to an upcoming inheritance, for example. Usually in these situations, the consumer also tends to buy more goods and services. That does not mean that the price of the good changed. It just means that the consumer is expecting to have more money in the near future. Thus, we cannot say that the quantity demanded of this good changed, because this change was not based on the price of the good. We say that the demand for this good increased, which implies a right shift of the demand curve. Consumers might also expect the price of a certain good to increase in the near future. If the price is expected to increase in the near future, people might rush to the store to buy this product now. Thus, even if the price has not changed yet, the demand for this product will increase and the demand curve will shift to the right. If the price is expected to decrease in the near future, people might decide to wait a certain time before buying this product. Thus, even if the price has not changed yet, the demand for this product will decrease for now and the demand curve will shift to the left. The goods and services that increase in demand when income increases or when income is expected to increase are called normal goods. These are the goods we buy more from when we have more money. Thus, when income increases, the demand for normal goods increases, and the demand curve for normal goods shifts to the right. Nevertheless, there are certain other goods which consumers tend to buy less when their income increases or is expected to increase, such as an economy class ticket, $1 shop or thrift store products, or a second-hand equipment. This is because the more money a person receives, the better is the quality of the goods and service that person acquires. Thus, when income increases, the demand for inferior goods decreases, and the demand curve for inferior goods shifts to the left. Lastly, the goods for which consumers' tastes and preferences are greater will have a higher demand than others, even if the prices are higher. When consumers' tastes and preferences for a certain product increase, even though its price stays the same, the demand for this good will increase and its demand curve will shift to the right. When consumers' tastes and preferences for a certain product decrease, even though its price stays the same, the demand for this good will decrease and its demand curve will shift to the left. So, before we terminate with this chapter, let's just recap some important info. A change in price of a good or service leads to a change in quantity demanded, which is a movement along a demand curve. Change in income, preferences, or prices of other goods or service leads to change in demand, which is a shift of the demand curve. We will be going over a thorough analysis of supply, quantity supplied, and market equilibrium and its relation to demand next Wednesday. This is it from economics for this week. But if you have reached the end of this video, it is because the content is helpful to you somehow. If this is the case, don't forget to give your friends and acquaintances the opportunity to have access to these videos by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing to this channel. We will be continuing with the second part of this lecture next Wednesday, but before that, I will see you all on Friday with some finance content. Thank you so much.